Today, we're making knives. Today we're making knives, belts, knee pads, and a somewhat wearable Fremen costume. Let's get into it. So, if you missed the first two videos, go watch them. But basically, in the first video, I came up with these designs for me and my boyfriend's Halloween costume as Paul and Chani from DUNE. My goal with the costumes was to have them break down into wearable parts so that it doesn't get thrown into the back of my closet for whenever I find the heart to throw it away or donate it. In the second video, I made my costume, this combination of jumpsuit and shrug, and in this video, I will be making my boyfriend's look based on this design, with some minor adjustments for time, as well as making some of the accessories that will be for both of us, including, you guessed it, Cris knives! So now that you're all caught up, we can get started. First, since we were having some sunny fall weather, I sent my look out to chill on the clothesline. Hopefully that will help fade it, cause I made it from brand new thrifted fabric, which left it looking a little too perfect. I had tried some different fading techniques in the last video, but I thought, leaving it out in the sun can't hurt. Little foreshadowing for the final part of this process next week, where I'll be doing some more distressing to try and achieve this desert-worn look. So now that my look has been banished to the elements, let's get started on my boyfriend's. Now Etienne did warn me that he was going to be a party pooper and that my design was a little too extravagant. So along with some simplifications to the design, I also had to deal with the fact that I had used up all of my black fabric. My first stop is always the thrift store, and since I happened across some XL sweatpants, I decided to shamefully take the easy way out and use them as a base. Thankfully, they were already pretty faded, so at least that saved me a bit of work later. I also had this giant black long sleeve tee that was destined for the donation bin, so I decided to use that as the base for the top. First, I split the pants down their sides to remove the branding, as well as prep for tailoring because I already knew they weren't going to fit Etienne off the bat. I also didn't want to lose the drawstring for fit comfort, so I quickly sewed the drawstrings back together. This was actually a stroke of genius because it made it so much easier to fit the pants on him by just tying it around his waist.
That looks so good. You should wear these like that. You should make you some more like this.
Even though I thought they looked pretty cool open on the sides, I knew I had to get down to business. Once I was sufficiently pleased with the fit, I made him try the shirt on and marked out where I would add these stripes from the design. Since he's in the middle of his exams, I wanted to make sure that I had all the information I needed to finish this even if he wasn't available to try it on throughout the process. With the confirmed fit, I went ahead and sewed up the sides. To seal the seam, I flattened it and then did a secondary seam about 2 millimeters from the edge. I also went over the waistband area with a zigzag to really aggressively seal it. Finally, my least favorite activity à cause de my tiny apartment, ironing. While ironing is super satisfying, I'm notoriously accident prone, and since I have no dedicated area for ironing, I'm forced to use any available surface, which has been a little bit dangerous for the irons. This means that I'm already on my second iron, and the steamer in it doesn't work, so I have to spray whatever I'm ironing with a little spray bottle if it needs steaming. Now that all those seams are pretty and flat, let's get on to the top. I went to grab the shirt I had marked up for stripe panels, but unfortunately, my cat had some other plans. If you ever notice that everything is covered in cat hair, this is the culprit. She truly seems to have a passion for sitting on my projects, and you might think she just likes to have something soft to sit on. But there's literally fabric everywhere, and pillows and cushions and carpets, and yet, somehow, she always finds herself sitting on the thing that I'm working on the second I leave the room. Now, I love her very much, so I let her get away with it. After carefully extricating the shirt from under Miss Marbeau, I got started on the stripe panels. After a quick measure, I cut the strap panel into the strips and got to work pinning them in place. After I was pleased with the placement, I moved on to sewing them about 1 millimeter from the edge on both sides of the panel. Since I already knew that the shirt was too big for him, I got Etienne to try it on, marked out where it needed to be tailored, pinned it inside out, then sewed along the lines I had marked, and finished off by trimming the edges. With the stripes all finished, it was time to tackle this part of the design. Since Etienne made it quite clear that if I did the same sort of quilted piping as I did on my jumpsuit, sewn into the pants, he would probably not end up wearing them, I had to improvise. I mocked up the shape that I would need in chalk on the pants, and then I used some scrap fabric to create those shapes for both the front and the back. This time though, I pinned them right sides together and then sewed them up. Now if I was going to insert them into the pants, I would have sewn them wrong sides together so that I could use the seam allowance to be able to attach them to the other panels. In this case, by sewing them right sides together, after turning them insides out, I am left with clean edges and no visible seams. Then I used some more stuffing I had laying around to fill them, I connected them, and then sewed down over them, creating that stripe piping effect just like in the previous video. Now I have to admit that if I were making this for a more serious occasion, I would have used batting. It's like a sheet of stuffing and creates a much more evenness in texture. However, since Etienne will not be wearing this little quilted crotchless panty for many other occasions, I thought we could use what I already had laying around. Now that I was more or less finished the garments, it was time to tackle some accoutrements. Over the course of different styling jobs, I've collected an absurd amount of protective pads from thrift stores across the city. So I thought this would be the perfect moment to put them to use. However, the straps on them were a bit ugly and really giving rollerblade realness, so I thought I would update them to match the rest of the look. I used the remaining scraps from the shirt I used for the stripes and cut the sleeves into decreasing sized panels based on the size of the associated pads. I did some quick finishing, just tucking the raw edge under and running a stitch over the top. Then I put the pad inside, marked out the width of the pad, cut it, and then push the pad part through the hole. I think this worked pretty well as a quick fix, so I went ahead and did it for the rest of the pads. Now, with all the pads done, I was getting a bit sick of sewing and needed a break. Unfortunately, this wasn't the only thing I was sick with. While I was finally ready to tackle the Cris knives and the belts, I had some unfortunate news. I am quite sick, but Halloween waits for no one, and I have several costumes I need to finish, starting with the DUNE costume. I decided to start with the belts to ramp myself up a bit before I got into the more technical task of the Cris knives. And for that, I have this Eva foam that's 3mm, so I'm going to be trying to make those belts out of this guy. Now, I did really just order this off of the website that shall not be named, aka Amazon. I don't even remember like doing the math or anything for the measurements. Ow. Just fully going for, I feel like 3mm is a buildable thickness, not too thick, not too thin. I feel like this is a decent amount for me to be able to make 2 belts. My game plan here is to model something off of this belt that I've got here in terms of shape and fit, because I just love this belt. Using the dimensions of the belt for reference, I mocked up a little sketch and then traced some of the key pieces on paper. And once I was ready, I went ahead and traced out the belt on the Eva foam. I was feeling a little bit at the end of my rope, so I decided to just go for it and not do too much measuring back and forth. After tracing the belt with some pen, I cut it with an X-Acto knife. After marking and cutting the rest of the shapes needed to create 2 sets of these belts, it was time for assembly. My plan for the assembly of the front crotch piece was to use scraps to build up some thickness and then sandwich it between 2 panels of that long hexagonal shape. And things were going pretty well, where I would glue a layer and then let the glue gun continue to heat up between gluing and use the heat gun to treat the Eva foam in a way that makes the texture look shinier and basically helps mold it. Unfortunate news, the heat gun has died. It's been slowly getting weaker over the past couple of years that I've had it, so I guess I'm not totally surprised that it's done. But you know, it sucks that it was in the moment as I was doing this. Basically, the heat gun turns this into this. It really adds this like really cool shine. So I was in the middle of heat gunning this guy, and then it just said good evening. And I think that was my cue to also say good evening for this one. Unfortunately for sick Maya, I'm still a workaholic, so I had the bright idea of testing a hairdryer to see if it would be hot enough in order to create the same effect. Spoiler alert, it did. After giving this belt the best blowout it could wish for and crisping my fingertips in the process, the pieces were finally ready for assembly. I put all the pieces together with hot glue and a bit of super glue based on my sketch. After a quick fitting to make sure it all looked good, I attached Velcro straps in order to make it easy to take on and off. Now that the belts are more or less done, I'm still sick, and this wasn't technically in the plan, but I came across these medieval magic wand, and I just thought maybe I could melt this a little and flatten it and then paint it to make it look like a Cris knife. So, since it is 12:05, seems like the perfect time to do some Cris knife shenanigans. Don't try this at home. I'm gonna be wearing heat protective gloves. I've done this before, not like this, but I've done plastic molding with heat before. But yeah, essentially this is not a guide, but I am gonna try and I'm gonna hope for the best. And I feel like if we just flatten a bit, it is really giving a toothful shape. I think it could be pretty good. So let's see. So without further ado, show you how it looks if it works.
A few minutes later.
Ta-da! Look how beautiful and flat they are. Of course, the shape is not all the way there yet, so I'm gonna use some hot glue and then some air dry clay to fill out the gaps and really smooth things out before painting. After waiting a couple days for that clay to fully dry, I laid down a white base coat because I wanted to do the other coloring with spray paint, and in order to make sure that it would be a smooth and even coat, a good layer of base is always useful. After a couple base layers were all dry, I got set up outside by prepping my area to prevent spray paint from going everywhere, and then I got to work spraying them silver and glossy top coat. I actually started with an orange in order to give it a kind of brown, bronzy silver look to it, almost like tarnished silver. I later added some black to the hilts to give it that aged bone look, but I did forget to film that. So even though I got a lot of stuff done in this video, I kind of don't really feel like it's done, and it needs to be done pretty soon because I gotta film the 4th video before Halloween. But, you know, so just to go over what I finished in this video, we've got my boyfriend's pants. Etienne very sadly notified me that he would probably not wear these pants if these were sewn into them the way they are on my jumpsuit. Unfortunately, I had to make it as these separate crotchless panties situation that you can attach over them, but then once this costume's over, I'll find another use for them. We've also got these 2 belts. Looking pretty good. They look really nice on camera. They don't look as perfect in person, but since in the next video I'm going to be doing some distressing on the costumes and making them look a little more grimy and dirty, and I will do the same on the belts. Hopefully it will connect the two and make them feel more cohesive. We also got this metric ton of knee and elbow goodbye pads, but if I have time I will be cutting out a circle here to make it look a little more like my original design. I was running out of time, so I did have to simplify things, and at the end of the day I kind of realized in reality some of these things made it look a little more costumey, and at the end of the day the whole goal of this project was to make the major pieces of this costume stay wearable. Of course, while I'm a little bit more of a risk taker than my partner, I know what I won't and will wear. And don't worry, these aren't gonna go to waste. They're still totally functional pads, so I will still use them for my ridiculous activities. They just now have a nicer looking strap. And last, but certainly not least, we have the absolutely stunning, just my favorite part of this costume. I'm gonna have to put these on the wall after I'm done. This is the result of my melted wand foam clay. They aren't necessarily movie accurate, but Dune is initially a book series, so I'm gonna say this is how I interpret a sandworm's tooth to look like. Quite pleased with these. They're so much fun to fight air with. Can't say I'm not loving that. Yeah, I'm pretty excited to get to bring these out and feel like they're definitely my favorite part of the costume. Thank you so much for watching. In the next video, I'll be finishing up, griming up all these things, finishing up the sun fading on my costume, making our capes, and all final details and accessories to finish the look off. Leave a comment letting me know what you think. of this costume, this video, subscribe. I'm simply incapable of holding those knives without making mouth noises to symbolize my swordsmanship.